Hi, I'm Barb.
Hi, I'm Pat.
Pat and I have a lot of interesting conversations.
Yes, and we thought you might like to listen in to our podcast that we've called Coffee House Inspirations.
We hope you will enjoy our topics.
Good morning, Barb.
Good morning, Pat.
How are you today?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good.
I was just looking out the window at the bleak sky and the snow on the trees. You know, when I think just a few days ago we had spring. So that's all.
We're just gonna have to provide our own sunshine today.
Exactly, and we can do that.
Well, plus I've been really looking forward to this conversation on dreams.
Me too.
What we're going to start out with today, and we've had a couple of sort of smaller discussions about it, and that and also talking about the fact that dreams are kind of a complex subject because there aren't just one kind of dream or one sort of interpretation for dreams or one way to remember dreams. It's a kind of a complicated sort of subject matter in that sense, and for, I'm sure, every person that you talk to, they will have a different experience of dreams.
Yes, I would agree with that, and a good different interpretation of what they are.
Yes, yes. I used to look at the dream interpretation books because there was many of them.
Mm-hmm.
You have this in a dream, it means this, but I threw those out because I realized that every dream is a personal expression of what's going on in your own consciousness, so that to have a one for all or one fits all kind of interpretation wasn't that helpful. So
yeah.
I've learned different ways of interpreting dreams, and also just gathering more information about it and so on.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
So I think one of the things that I was thinking about as a starting point is to take a look at sort of dreams within a kind of a larger context.
Okay.
Because we have this idea that when we're asleep, that there's really very little going on. But in fact, our consciousness never sleeps. So we have a waking consciousness and what we call a sleep time or sleeping consciousness. But the fact that dreams can enter the world of sleep means that there is still some level of consciousness occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're sleeping, we don't give it the same recognition, I guess, or questioning or understanding, thinking that we're just asleep and so everything is asleep. But in fact, consciousness never sleeps.
Right.
So it's just that kind of cool idea that there's a stream of consciousness flowing through us that is always on. There's no off button. So that's kind of an interesting thing to contemplate in a way, because it also indicates that the information that our consciousness is accessing when we're sleeping is possibly as valid from an information point of view as the waking consciousness gathers information. And then you could go so far down the road that you could even ask which one is real.
Exactly.
So that can kind of be also an interesting contemplation as well, because why wouldn't we pay as much attention to the so-called sleeping mind than we would to the awake mind? And there are a lot of indicators and a lot of research that says that the unconscious sort of sleeping mind, where consciousness is running through that as well, but we call it unconscious, is actually closer to sort of the unfiltered events of our lives, because we're not filtering it through the awake mind.
Exactly.
And so we went a little further even with that, which I looking forward to your discussion about, because we also have the topic of visitation in dreams, and
Mhm.
where would that, what level of consciousness would that be from? So talk a little bit about your experience and what you've read about that.
Okay. Well, and I just wanted to say that another term, if you want, uh, there's the waking consciousness and the sleeping consciousness, or some people might refer it to like an inner world and an outer world, like that kind of like you said, when what's real,
Right.
if they're both just as real, you have an inner and you have an outer.
Good point. I like
But-
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like I've had one in particular I can remember for sure, a visitation. Now, I can't really recall if I've had any more, but this one in particular really stands out for me. And it was someone that had passed away, and they came back to say goodbye. And so so this person was a male, and he kissed me, and I remember the feeling of that kiss was so powerful. There were no words spoken, but the feeling of that was so powerful that I will never forget it. And this was probably, I'd say, maybe close to 20 years ago. So when I looked up visitations in a dream, I found a site that has it has eight characteristics of true visitation dreams, and so I'm just going to read them off, and each one applied for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So so the first important characteristics of a true visitation dream is that it feels real. It will also be very vivid. So it just feels like it's so real. Like you can tell, when you've had a dream, you wake up and you had a dream. But this just feels different.
Right.
Just so real. And then number two, if you have to ask whether the visitation dream was really a visitation dream, then it probably was not a visitation. Like if you're wondering, then it probably wasn't. They're so real and vivid that you won't even have to ask that question. When you do have a visitation dream, you may wonder if it was truly real, but in your heart or gut, you will know it was real.
So that's what you're saying about your experience, is that it felt so intensely real.
Yes.
It couldn't be forgotten.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there's no question in my mind that it wasn't real.
Right. Okay.
That's how vivid and real feeling that it was.
Gotcha.
And so and because they're so real and vivid, you will remember them very clearly for days, months, years, probably for your entire lifetime. So in my case, that is true. So that was about 20 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
So still very, very real. I can still remember it. I can still remember what it feels like, all of that. And so number four is the person or animal. So it can also be an animal.
Oh, okay.
And so I believe my son has had visitation dreams from our dog that passed away.
Oh.
The way that he describes it and the way that he feels when Champ has come to visit. And it says they'll usually come in a loving manner, and they will rarely appear sick or injured. They will never be angry, disappointed, depressed, or punishing. They will be whole, complete, and perfect because they're now reconciled with God or source energy. So that's another one of the characteristics. Yeah.
So it fits with that, with that idea of releasing the sort of the garments of the world as you pass on, and you come to that spiritual place where you're pretty whole again.
Yes, and of course this is going to depend on what everybody's beliefs are. Sure. Yeah. as well. But I would probably dare say that a lot of people, if not most, have probably felt like they've had one of these visitation dreams. I would think, anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, they will, whether they speak to you verbally or not, they will communicate very clearly. Like in this dream, there was no speaking,
Right.
the one that I had,
Yeah.
but it was very, very clear why he was there. He was there to say goodbye, to let me know that he loved me.
Yeah.
And that was the message.
Yeah. And that was all nonverbal.
It was all nonverbal.
The feelings would be very intense.
They were so intense. As a matter of fact, when I woke up, they were just so strong.
Right.
Still, they're very, very powerful. Yeah, and it says again, it isn't usually, they don't usually come to engage in chit chat. It's usually for a specific message with a purpose, and they will convey the message and then be gone. You see, so they'll come, convey the message, and then be gone. Most often, their messages will fall into the category of reassurance. They've come to let you know that they're okay and they want you to be happy. Sometimes with a warning. However, when giving a warning, they will give you loving support and you will feel reassured by their presence. So it's not going to be anything like really ominous. And then finally, after a visitation dream, when you wake up, you will often be filled with a sense of peace and love, which I was. That feeling of love and peace and everything was with me, and it was very, very powerful. And so when I when I read these, I thought, yeah, I could relate to all of them.
Well, that's really interesting because having those pointers, available, it really helps for people who are second guessing. Oh, maybe that was, maybe that wasn't, and that you can take it to a sort of a higher sort of, I guess you would say, general idea of the pointers of what would indicate that was actually a visitation. And to be able to dispel some of that skepticism or maybe the guessing or whatever, and to be able to take that reassurance in fully.
Yeah. And just get rid of some of that doubt.
Yes. Which really speaks to the expanse of the consciousnness in dreams as well, because like we were saying in the beginning, like if you've got a stream of consciousness that is turned on all of the time, no on off button, how broad that must go into the sort of the energy around everything, that somebody who has made a transition can access that stream of consciousness and find that stream of consciousness so clearly and impart a message is very kind of interesting to talk about, but also very reassuring.
Well, yes, because there was also, I did read somewhere as well that it actually is difficult for them to do that. So I can't remember exactly what it said, but it did say, like what you just described, about someone or something finding that energy where they can come in and have a visitation is difficult for them to do.
Sure.
So it's special. I would say that's probably why it probably doesn't happen all the time.
Or it might be also be why people don't really talk about it much, because it would involve a little bit of the esoteric, a little bit of going beyond the regular realm of what we think dreaming and consciousness is, to go to that place where you would have an acceptance, or at least a possibility that a spiritual connection may in fact be more accessible than we think it is.
Exactly. Now, have you had an experience with a visitation, or do you feel like you have had?
I think I was, yeah, well, by those standards now, I would say yes. I was probably in my 20s, and a very, very close friend of mine died. And I had a dream where they just came. This it's kind of a long time ago. It's like they came into my view and turned around and just smiled, and it was the most generous, loving smile,
Mm-hmm.
and a kind of and like an actual, deep smile that was an exchange, that was like an exchange, and then turned and was gone.
Wow.
and
Yeah.
and I still get shivers when I talk about it, because it had such a profound effect on me. But I do recall a lot of second guessing that, and I say, oh, dreams are weird, and weird things happen in dreams, and you never know, and all that sort of thing. But as you're describing those pointers, it now makes sense that indeed was a visitation,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because
I think
you don't forget them.
no, exactly. You don't forget them. And that feeling is so powerful. And even when you wake up, it's still with you. And it is loving. It's so loving and peaceful. And you can just feel it. It's a wonderful feeling.
That's really cool. I like that. Thank you. So we were also going to talk a little bit about lucid dreaming. And I've been sort of studying lucid dreaming for a number of years, and have had a number of lucid dreams, and they're not as unusual and difficult as it may seem, because the more I read about them, the more common they are, and they're so heavily researched right now that there are projects going on now where people in experiments they're trying to have conversations with people in lucid dreams.
Oh, really?
A lot of recognition of the level of the ability to become kind of awake in a dream, because that's really what a lucid dream is. It's when you're dreaming and you suddenly become aware. You go, oh, I'm dreaming.
That's awesome.
And I remember the very first time I had a dream like this. It was just a fun thing, but it was kind of shocking to me, and it took me a while to sort of absorb it. I was walking along a railroad track, and I realized that I could jump pretty high. Just kind of, I was running and kind of jumping, and I thought,
Uh-huh.
this has got to be a dream, because I don't like this. And in my dream, I thought, okay, if I'm dreaming, how high can I jump? And I just kept jumping higher and higher and higher. And I thought, yep, this is cool. I know I can't do this. And I am now in a dream where I'm feeling like I have control over how high I can jump.
Wow.
And then of course it faded, and it baffled me for quite some time, which is how I really started studying the concept of lucid dreams. And there seems to me to be, because when we're sleeping, we're in a level of consciousness that we really don't examine that much, because we consider it sleep time. And yet there is so much going on there that we can surprisingly become awake to while we're sleeping. Now, doesn't that kind of blow your mind a little bit?
It does. It really does.
Yes.
Now, is that a common thing? Is lucid dreaming common? I know I've had one in my lifetime that I can recall. So is that a common thing?
When you're looking at a little bit of the research and the stats, they say around about 50 to 52% of people have reported lucid dreams. Now, you always have to remember that in studies, it's only the people that they talk to.
Right.
So when those statistics are presented, it's of the folks that they have actually had in the test group. So but they seem to be comfortable with the idea that they're about 55 max people have had lucid dreams, or that they're aware of. But I wonder how many of those experiences might be just lost because it's not something you're ready to do or ready to connect with. Like, tell me about what your experience was.
Well, you know what? I can't exactly remember what the dream was, but I do remember realizing that I was in a dream. And like you, I felt like I could now determine what happened next. And like I said, I don't really have a clear memory of what exactly was going on at the time, but that's what I can remember. I remember thinking, oh, I think I'm in a dream, and therefore I can do this.
Right.
And so that's about all the memory that I have of it.
Well, that's very much the flavor of it, for sure. I had another lucid dream. This was even weirder. We had been on with our family, had been on holidays, and we'd been in an area of the United States where they have these corn palaces. And
what's a corn palace?
well, it's an area, and I can't remember exactly where this was, but they're where they grow a lot of corn, and so they do everything under the sun with corn. And one of the things
okay.
they do is they make buildings out of the corn husks and all this and that and the other thing. And so we were all kind
Okay.
of, and so a little while later, I had this dream, and I was in a small town that had all its buildings made out of these corn products of varying kinds. And then I thought, oh, I think I'm awake because I think one of those buildings just moved a little bit. And I think I'm awake. And I don't know what the association was. And I in my mind, I said, if I'm awake, I'm going to move it back where it was. And so I walked up to the building, put one hand on each side of the corner, and moved it back where it was.
Oh, wow.
And I was a little awestruck at that. And then I thought, oh, so when you're dreaming and you're awake, you can do anything.
Yes, and that is the sense that I got as well. That you can now kind of manipulate,
yes,
or decide what your next next move is.
So that kind of speaks to a lot of things in a sense, because we're as we delve more into sort of the mind and the psychology of the mind, the spirituality of the mind, and that sort of thing, we begin to also realize how very conditioned we are, and how very conditioned we are in our limitations. And so it makes me think, I wonder about the consciousness in lucid dreaming. Is that a door opening for us to be less limited in how we see the constraints and lack of those kind of abilities in the waking world? So a lot of people were always ask, if when I'm in these articles and the books that I've read, is how do you become more involved in lucid dreaming, and it really is not that difficult. I think if you're open to it and you're really curious about it, and to remember that it's your consciousness that you're dealing with. It's not, nobody is interfering with your life, or other than your own ideas and your own training and your own conditioning. And they also know that lucid dreaming takes place during REM sleep, so it's the same kind of brain function as regular dreaming is in the rapid eye movement. That's how they tell when you're in dreams, and that lucid dreams happen in REM sleep, and that you can actually give yourself messages before you go to sleep that are affirming that you're wanting to or willing to lucid dream.
Okay.
It's not necessarily an immediate kind of reaction, but that you can begin to sort of recondition your mind a little bit to the fact that, number one, you accept that there are lucid dreams, and number two, that you can speak to yourself in an affirmative way so that you're accepting of the dream. Because a lot of what I think, my experience is, a lot of what keeps people from it is that they're afraid a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Because if you think that you're too powerful in this dream, or you have too much control over it, might freak you out a little bit.
Yeah.
And this also takes us back to a little bit of what you were saying last week about how important it is to keep a dream journal. So that you can, keep track of are your dreams the same, or are they evolving, or do you have, little moments where you have lucid lucid moment within the dream, so that you can kind of know if you're sort of on the track, or if this is, making sense, or whether you've got some resistance even in your
Mm-hmm.
at that level of your subconscious or whatever. So that's another thing is, and plus it's just really interesting, as you said last week, to really keep, journal of what your dream world has been like.
Yes, and it's funny. I was looking at a dream yesterday in my dream journal, and I have a different way of looking at my dreams now, because a few years ago you helped me to understand a dream in a way that I had never thought of before, and since then I have tried to kind of use that analogy, or the way that you described it, in subsequent dreams and old dreams. When I look back, I reread it and I think, okay, what did this really mean? What was my subconscious thinking at the time? And it really puts a new spin on it. It's not so literal. The dreams aren't so literal as what I thought.
And that's because I think because our subconscious and our dream world is often presented in metaphors,
Exactly,
and symbols and feelings.
Yeah.
And so when we're having a dream that kind of, fuddles us a little bit, the first question that I always ask is, how did that incident or that situation make me feel? And then you can then you have a little door open to trace it back into something in your waking experience that may have had a similar feeling, so that it gives you a little bit of a clue of what your subconscious is trying to, I guess, resolve, or to try to be more aware of it. And they're all, and then you look at, all the metaphors that are known to you, and what does that mean, and what does this mean? It's good because you always have to go back to the fact that it's your consciousness that's presenting this information to you.
Yes.
And it doesn't, it's like somebody said to me the other day, I dreamt that he was skating or skiing or something with another girl, and I got so mad at him. And I said, wow, that's kind of displaced anger. What might be more useful is to look at why you think that might happen, or what would happen for you, so that you don't take your dream about somebody and then blame them for your dream.
Exactly. Yeah. I find that fascinating, that once you can kind of understand that, and it does take some practice for sure.
Yes.
But now, when you go back to those old dream dictionaries that are out there, and that were out there like years ago, it really doesn't mean anything anymore, because like you said, everybody has their own consciousness. So how can you look at a book and say that, a rabbit means the same thing for everybody?
Yeah, and I think that they often try to look at sort of universal symbols of things, which is okay, and there was certainly some merit. I'm not saying there isn't some, but that the way that we interpret the world is quite unique to us.
Exactly.
So the things that are presenting themselves in our dreams, like places and events and people, and it might not even be the person that you're actually having the issue with. You might be dreaming about some other person in that issue, but the feeling. And
right.
I think that's more speaking to this thing that just happened or whatever. And then it gives you an opportunity to understand that those things that come through at the subconscious level through the dreams are impacting you, because it's all one. You're all one. You have this one consciousness that just stays awake and looks at the world when you're awake, and then tries to interpret it when you're sleeping and bring that information to you. And so it's just one thing. And especially people that have, I think, recurring dreams, those are really interesting, because those are so resolvable once you understand what the symbols are, what the feelings are, and then you begin to wake up to how that is also in your present day. And some of those representations can be pretty darn weird too.
Well, that certainly explains why therapists like people to talk about their dreams, record their dreams, and because I think it gives them a bit of a window, doesn't it, into what's going on.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. So I think there's lots to talk about here, and we may even have some further discussion about this, because I think that those dream moments are such an important messenger for us.
Yes.
Things that we may not be prepared to look at when we're in wake time, or that we don't actually think are big deals, you know, or we're sort of have some kind of avoidance or denial about it or something like that. And the subconscious mind goes, no, we're here, we're thinking about it. Let's look at this.
Now, before we go, Pat, I just want to mention quickly what you ask you what you think about past life dreams, or is that for another time?
I think that's for another time, because that's a whole other level of consciousness, I think. But okay. I would love to have a discussion about that.
Okay. Yeah.
I've had a couple of past life regressions through hypnosis, blew the top off my brain. Well, that's a good idea, Barb.
Yeah. I think that would be a very interesting thing to talk about.
Oh God, now we're committed. Are we committed?
I think we're committed.
Well, that was fun.
It was
always a fun time, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
Bye.
Bye, Pat.